Pre-pandemic, 450 people took MBQs for scaffolding. Post-pandemic, 140. We're a long way from where we need to be. The apprenticeship wages, are they correct? The churn is too high. And if you're having to send them 2-3 hours away to go to a training centre, the chances of that person completing that training, there are issues there. Morally, we should all be training people. The bigger picture here is this industry is not sustainable at the rate that we're training people now. If we're looking sort of 5 to 10 years in the future, you could have quite a bleak view on it. When it happens, it'll happen very quickly. A lot of people undersell what a scaffold company does and undermine what a scaffolder is.
Hi, hello, my name is Sebastian Leek. I'm a Health and Safety Manager for Embassy Site Services, and today we've got our Embassy Academy Spotlight interview with a special guest, Rob Kendi from Scaffolding Association. Good morning.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
Yeah, so today's subjects will be touched base on will be scaffolding apprenticeships and scaffolding training. So we as an embassy have built up internal scaffolding academy, which is a bespoke training for our staff in-house. And then we will be talking about apprenticeships, the benefits of apprenticeships, and we're also going to touch base on a skills gap within the scaffolding and construction industry. Rob, what's your stand on the scaffolding apprenticeships schemes and the benefits?
I think when you're looking at the apprenticeship schemes and the MBQs, I think it's important to look at just how many people we can manage to get on those schemes. If you look at the figures for CSCS carded scaffolders and you look how many there are, if you look on the website, it says there are 50,000. If you look, so if we're saying there are 50,000 scaffolders, start work at 16, finish at 66, 50 years, we're going to lose 1,000 scaffolders a year. That's if those scaffolders stay fit and healthy, those scaffolders don't move jobs, those scaffolders don't die. And when you're looking at that, you've got over 1,000 scaffolders. I think before the pandemic, we did manage to reach over 1,000 MBQs being issued, but that only in effect will sustain where we are if nobody's ill, nobody leaves the industry. So probably before the pandemic, we weren't getting enough people into the industry to have a sustainable industry. Bearing in mind that you look at the Office of National Statistics, they're saying that construction was going to increase, things were going to increase. Even before the pandemic, we were saying we needed more people in construction. We weren't building enough houses. We weren't doing enough work. So therefore, you would anticipate we would need more. So pre-pandemic, 450 people took MBQs for scaffolding. Post-pandemic, 2020, 140. So we're a long way away from where we need to be in relation to the amount of people that the industry needs. So trying to get people onto apprenticeships and through MBQs is going to be paramount for businesses, for your own business to be sustainable. So it's important that we look at what we can do with that.
So, for example, how we can attract the new operatives, new bees, let's say, into the construction, how the businesses and, for example, the local authorities can help with it?
I think everything needs to be a little bit more localised when we're looking at issues that we've got within the industry. So when you look at major projects like HS2, Hinkley Point, given the current issues that we've had with fuel, the offshore industries ramp back up. If you look at that, those big projects are always going to need a lot of labour. So if you were to say that labour came from a localised base, if you're taking 2 people from every local authority in the UK, then that's great. You know, your local businesses can cope with that. A couple of blokes going to work on major projects, and we need people to go and work on major projects to get experience of other things and to pass down safety messages and other things. So there's a benefit to people going and working on these larger projects and the experience that they get there. But what it does do, it means that locally that can cause a massive problem for employers in that area if suddenly those ramp up and you lose, blokes because they've just gone on those projects. So I think when you're looking at that locally we should all have a plan for what we think is sustainable in our local area. So if you're looking at local authorities, and they're always going to have work, whether that's housing associations or local authority projects or even infrastructure projects within that region, the corporate social responsibility issues that construction projects have got that mean that they should be looking for those people that work on those projects to be employed and trained locally. So therefore everything needs to be more localized, but that leads to where should we be training the people.
So what I can get from that, we haven't got enough localized training center. So maybe we can improve, try to make the awareness and the and change the perception of the local businesses and local authorities to help out build internal training facilities for those local people who's looking for work, who's looking to get into construction or any of those projects.
Yeah, I think it's a construction focused thing. It's not just a scaffolding thing. There have been projects in the past, but they haven't been as successful as they should have been. But basically, when you're looking at the basic training that somebody should be getting to get onto a construction site, risk assessment, manual handling, workplace transport, all of these things, all of those should be able to be delivered localized. So it shouldn't be that you've got to send somebody miles and miles, which will be off-putting. Part of, we're talking about keeping people in the industry. How do you keep people in the industry? What you don't do. And if you're having to send them, as some of the scaffolding businesses are, 2-3 hours away to go to a training centre, then the chances of that person completing that training could be affected by the fact they're away from home, they've got to travel, they've got to stay away from home, they could feel isolated. So there are issues there. Also, from the business perspective, we don't want to be sending people a couple of hours or more on training or paying for hotels, because if they don't complete the training, it's another added expense of hundreds of pounds over that week or however many days it is. So there's a lot of issues there that we could address by keeping it localized, keeping it simple, and making sure that the training is modularized in a way that it's construction specific. So if the person didn't want to go into a career in scaffolding, that actually they'd have some qualifications there that could get them a job on a construction site as a roofer or a bricklayer or somebody else. So it's not wasted, because when we look at this, you can be entirely selfish and look at it just as a business. Oh, I've wasted that money, that person hasn't completed that training. But actually that person's gone through that training, that person's done that. So you want some benefit for them personally to be able to use that in future.
What do you think the war in Ukraine might bring into the British economy? How much effect that might be on the construction industry itself?
I think it'll have a massive effect. I think there are already major UK construction or worldwide construction companies looking at what the package might look like. There's going to be a lot of infrastructure work, a lot of other work there. Will that? I think it'll have exactly the same effect as major projects have now. So where we've got Hinkley Point, HS2, Thames Tideway, offshore ramping up, a load of people will, because they're normally higher paid jobs. But I think the war in Ukraine is interesting because it is in Eastern Europe, and we've got a lot of Eastern European scaffolders, particularly in the southeast. So could this be an opportunity for them? They may have been here for 10 years, 15 years, got some qualifications, and may think, well, actually, I could go back home and still work there. Or I presume quite a few of them are Ukrainian, so actually there might be even more incentives, like we said, tax efficiencies, all sorts of things now. So I think it's something we have to bear in mind, bearing in mind that we've got an ageing workforce, and a lot of the younger people that have been trained, what sort of makeup have we got there of people that may be Eastern European and may choose to go back across. But when it happens, it'll happen very quickly. I don't think this is going to be a sort of, you'll see a slow influx of people move back across. I think it'll be, 1 month the war will end, a period of time will have to happen for some kind of sort of understanding that it will be safe. And then when that period ends, I would imagine projects will kick off immediately, particularly hospitals, schools, So, and also there would be a big draw from people who are from Eastern Europe because you're going back to do the right thing. It's not just a sort of, it's more money, or it might not be more money, it might be less money, but there could be a sort of feeling that it's the right thing to do.
Yeah, so in terms of aging in construction, how we can prevent and get ourselves ready, the industry perceptions of it, how they can help to reduce those figures, because at this present time we're talking a lot, but we're not doing a lot.
Well, I think it's down to everybody. I think in the past, everybody knows, if you look very localized, everybody knows a company that's never trained somebody. They've just waited till the other companies around them have trained people and offered them a little bit more money and they've gone. So we've got a lot of companies who have never trained people or never had an apprentice or never. And, that's morally, is that the right way to do it? From a business perspective, how everybody runs their business is up to them. But morally, we should all be training people. And that causes sort of each individual business to look at what it is they're doing. If you look, we've got members that train 30, 40 apprentices, and they know they're going to lose some of them. They're not training them thinking we're going to keep hold of the whole 30. It would be nice, but they're still training them because they realise that the bigger picture here is this industry is not sustainable at the rate that we're training people now. So therefore, what are we going to do about it? So I think everybody's got to do a bit of looking at how do we do that. So there's various routes that they can go down with that, but it is for everybody to play part in it.
So that's, we're talking about the tier 1 clients, we're talking about tier 2. So that needs to put something, that needs to put their account into their baskets to help out, spread it along. And then at this present time, I don't feel there's as many companies as being participate into it. As I have mentioned before, we are talking about it. We try to raise the awareness within the industry, but it seems like we banging our head against the wall. We're not getting anywhere.
I think there's a lot of initiatives, a lot of things that people don't understand and people don't go about in the right way. So one of those is the CITB levy. A lot of people don't understand it. We've been having webinars with the Scaffolding Association to explain to people what it's about, how you can get funding out of it. And it's done through Parliament, so everybody should be paying the levy. So if you're paying it, why should you not be getting something out of it? But I think also understanding how you claim, what you do. So there are webinars through the Scaffolding Association that they hold with the CITB, but it's imperative. Most people pay a lot of money into that levy, so making sure you can maximise the money out of it is important to everybody, because without that, if you haven't got the additional funding, it's something that can be quite a burden on some businesses. But I think when you're looking at how a business looks, what a business looks like, if you look at your business plan, where's your allocation for training? Where's your allocation for recruitment? Are you waiting for somebody else to do that? Is it part of your business strategy, or do you just look at it as a cost? Because good businesses will look at it that this is what we do. we build scaffold, we build a table, we do it. But actually, to do that, you need staff. So recruitment and training must come included within that. But I think it's important that people's mindset is that where in the past people have come into the industry, and if you look at very localized scaffold businesses, most people get into the industry because their uncle did it, their brother did it, they play football with somebody who did it. So the sort of way that people come in, and that's a construction thing in general, the way that people come into the industry isn't as sort of slick and as organized as people would think it would be. But I think we've got to take a slightly different approach to that now, as to where we look for people, how we look for people, and also how we describe what we do. Because I think a lot of people undersell what a scaffold company does and undermine what a scaffolder is. You know, when you're looking at that and you say something like, you know, I work in the specialist engineering sector, I design and build steel and aluminium structures to complex industry standards. Nobody would think that's a scaffolder, but it is. And I think when we're looking at recruitment, how we explain what the job is, because unfortunately the rest of industry, or the sort of people outside the construction industry and people's view on scaffolding, you can understand why their perception of it isn't where we see it. So if you look at the best scaffolding or the most complex scaffolding projects that you can see, they're offshore on nuclear projects, on major infrastructure projects, major projects. The scaffolding's normally sheeted or got signage on it. You can't see what the guys are doing. But actually the stuff that's on the street or on a domestic project, which is the lowest price scaffold down there, where people don't wear harnesses, people bomb kit, people do all these other things, that's people's perception of scaffolding, because that's the only bit they see. So we've got to be a little bit cleverer about how we advertise the industry, what we're saying about the industry, and how qualified the people are, because people don't see it as a profession. Well, actually, when you look at the rewards for being a scaffolder and the opportunities within certain businesses for career progression, then it's a very good career pathway for a lot of people.
How we can improve the training program, or even the design of the training for in construction overall and in scaffolding industry, for example?
I think we've got to be a little bit more thoughtful about where the learners are and what the learners expect. There are too many people who have been involved in the industry for a long time making decisions about how people are trained without really understanding what young people are about. Young people will overcome problems that we don't even know exist. Young people will survive. Young people will get over where they need to be. But are we approaching them in the right way for them to come into this industry? Are we explaining to them in the right way? And are we providing training for them in the right kind of format? So most young people are extremely competent on phones and tablets and computers. And I understand why a lot of older guys maybe didn't want to do things on computers. But I think the digitalisation of the industry can only be of benefit, whether it's something as simple as if you don't get paid because you haven't got a handover certificate, and when you did the handover certificate, your copy of it went sailing off across the site because you wrote it on a piece of paper, whereas if you do it on your phone and you issue an electronic handover certificate, you've always got it, then that's a way. So if that's where the industry's going, then I think we've got to look at more distance learning, which does away with the problem that we were talking about people having to travel or stop overnight to receive training. We haven't got enough qualified scaffold instructors. So if that's what we need those scaffold instructors to be doing, is spending more of their time training people on the actual scaffolding part of scaffolding. I think some of the topics that are covered could be covered by distance learning or could be covered by other professionals. So, for instance, there are people, I'm not saying scaffold instructors aren't qualified in asbestos, but you're better to go to somebody who understands asbestos. Before this, Seb, we were talking about tie testing. You know, there are a lot of people who really understand tie testing, what the substructures are, all the other things, and actually that's quite a complex thing to look at. It might be that that training could be delivered by different people, not a scaffold instructor. So I think if you can break that down, you can modularize it into specific health and safety law. You know, it's quite a complex sector. It's quite boring for young people. So therefore, if there was another way of doing that, then that would be how we could do it. So if you have got to send them to a specialist centre that's got all the facilities to erect scaffolding and do everything, the time that they're spending there, they should be spending in that facility doing that work. If they're sat at desks, then is there an opportunity to move that away from that centre to somewhere that's more localised, or for somebody who may have a better level of expertise in the subject matter?
What do you think about the young people getting into construction? What's your opinion on that?
I think we've got to sort of review where we are, and I think this could be a bit of a political issue, because I don't believe that at the moment, the way that schools are run, it's in their interests to send people into construction jobs. And if we look at the funding cycle of where schools are when people are going through qualifications, there's probably more funding available to send people into higher education than there is to get them into a job. So I think there are things there that we may have to lobby for politically to make sure that that funding's available. If that funding isn't available, it might be an opportunity for businesses or local authorities to look at funding to get people into jobs. So if you've got a headmaster and he can get some funding for putting somebody into higher education but not getting them a job, if you were able to match that funding somewhere, then it might be that that's an opportunity to do that. But it doesn't stop there. When you're looking at young people and getting them involved in the industry, what can we do? It goes back to what I was talking about earlier, really, about the perception of the industry. I don't think we're selling it to them in the right way. It is a specialist engineering sector, and that's how we should be portraying the industry. So, you know, when you look at other industries, how they sell themselves, we don't actually open ourselves up in the right way. And then, as we've just been saying, sort of looking at the training process, what does that look like? And actually looking at that from a monetized perception. When you're looking at what we want as a business, what does the learner want? What does the person who we want to be our employee get out of it? The apprenticeship wages, are they correct? Should we be topping them up? What do you want to be doing with that? And also, at what stage do you monetize the training program? And I'm not on about just what the apprenticeship program will pay that person. As a business, is there a way that we could look at creating the training in a way where actually that person has done this much training and is actually worth more value, business value to you, because they're now capable of doing a little bit more, whereby you could afford to say, well, actually, that's it. But actually, if this wasn't an apprenticeship and this was an MVQ, we'd already be paying you this because you're now capable of what that person's capable of. So I think, you know, young people are very conscious of where they are financially. So, you know, you've got to have a look at that. The apprentice scheme predominantly has always been, you need to look at this long term. So perhaps the youth don't look at it that long term. So we perhaps need to look at how we can monetize that a little bit, because there is too much of a dropout in the amount of people that start qualifications and fail to finish them. And that's a big cost to business, and it's a big loss of that person's time if when they're going through that process, the qualifications that they're gaining can't be used if they wanted to transfer to another job or move on into a different career. So I think it's important that we look at how we do that. And it doesn't end there, because when we're talking about young people, even when they're qualified, we'll have a scenario where they'll still leave your business and go to another business. So how do we look at retention? How do we look at what a good employer looks like? How do we look at ourselves? Because, you know, as a business, do we do the bare minimum we need to do? Do we do more? How do we look at that? What is the cost of a guy leaving, going somewhere else, us having to re-induct somebody, re-PPE, probably haven't got all your old PPE back, probably haven't got, you know, and somebody was telling me a story of a guy who they'd given a van, just phoned him up and said, I'm not coming back to work for you. And his van was 40 miles away in a car park. And he said, oh, and the key's in the exhaust. You know, that's where you go in. So it goes from one extreme to the other. But what's a business cost? That was probably 2 people they had to put in a van to go out because one guy had left. Could have been for the money, but it could have been the way they run their business, what they do, what kind of work they do. So I think everybody's got to have a look at that, because I think that the churn in construction in general, not just scaffolding companies, is too high. So what are the factors with that? Age, health, what type of work are you doing? You know, a lot of companies don't use 21s anymore, because some of them have got a lot of guys that are a little bit older. So hang on a minute, is that a good thing? Is that, you know, is it a health and safety issue, emping long tubes, or is it, you know, a manual handling issue? The guys are getting a bit older and don't want to be pulling themselves about. So there's a lot of things, you know, if we want to keep people in the industry as they get older, have we got the correct career pathways for people to get into health and safety, as you've done? Have we got the pathways for them to become surveyors? You know, as much as we're looking at qualifications for scaffolders here, every scaffold company, you know, if you look in all the online, everybody is after QSs, everybody's after estimators, everybody's after contracts managers. So, you know, what is that progression route, and is it mapped out in a way that somebody can understand it? Because, you know, having somebody who's got many years in the scaffold industry and losing them because they don't want to physically do scaffolding anymore is just ridiculous. You know, they've got years of experience within the industry, so we need to try and keep hold of them, but there should be formally recognised qualifications for that. So at the moment they can get their scaffold qualification, but very few scaffold estimators have got
scaffolding estimating
qualifications for
estimating in the scaffolding,
or contracts.
Or contracts, correct. Yeah, so how we can reduce that gap, and how we can implement something that that we work out and that will help out to attract new people, you know, new.
When you look at new people, there's a lot of talk of young people, but like I said, we've just sort of looked that at a very early age, we could probably lose 90% of the people that are at school because they won't look at construction because they're being forced towards higher education, other routes. So where's that alone isn't going to fulfill the skills gap. We're going to need to look at other avenues. So I think the forces is a good route for a lot of people, particularly when you're looking at scaffold designers or people with engineering backgrounds. I think that they've already got a lot of qualifications, and some of the things that the forces have done over the last couple of decades is formalise the qualifications so that they actually match external qualifications. Because what used to happen, and I've come across this, my background, I used to work for the electricity board, and we had a lot of internal qualifications, and what they did was actually match those against external, and what we ended up was doing IOSH, managing safely, external qualifications, which is what you've got now with people who have come from the forces or other services. So, you know, they will come with some qualifications. They also get funding towards the end of the time before they come out, which can be used for external qualifications. But I think there are a few programs at the conference. There was a guy that was doing a program up in Liverpool with ex-offenders, and the same, you can get them on rebuttal, which means the last 6 months of their sentence, they can come out between 7 and sort of 6, and you can take them on site and use them. So that gives them that experience. Is that something that they'd like to do when they get out? Because with offenders, basically, if they get a job, they're less likely to offend. If they don't get a job within 6 weeks of them offending, a lot of them reoffend. So, you know, there's a lot of work there. But I think there are still other places. We don't look at other industries where people might want to come into this industry. And the industry as a whole does a lot of work on things like mental health. And looking after people that are within the industry is vital. We looked at the rate of suicide and other bits. So, you know, there's a lot of work. We've got a lot more mental health first aiders. We've got to look at how they're used, but having more people there to listen is the key behind that. And people thinking there might be somebody they can talk to, that's great. But actually, there are a lot of people that we could be looking at that have got mental health issues that maybe are because they haven't got any money, they haven't got a home. So perhaps we should be working with local authorities to look at those people and say, we could provide them with a job. Could you provide them with a flat? How do we look at doing that as a joined up thing, not just, you know,
as individuals, yeah.
As individuals, because if that's part of the problem. If the problem is they're worried because they haven't got any money, if the problem is they haven't got a purpose, if the problem is they don't know what they're doing or where they're going, if you can focus that into something, then I think the opportunity's there for that to be something which becomes an issue and should be a political issue, comes from somebody who's draining the resources that the government are using to somebody who's actually paying tax. So you would think that would be something that they'd be quite keen to look at.
Yeah, so quite benefits for it. So you have mentioned that there is a big grey area about the mental health within the. We touched base on the construction, but you just uncovered the second sets of cards, saying there is a people in the grey area, they're waiting to be helped, they're left alone, and then we as businesses and then we as a industry, we need to do a little bit more than that, than talk about it, than training people and just leave those people in needs on their own.
Yeah, it's like I said, what type of a business or what type of an industry are we? If we're saying, oh, we haven't got enough people, but we're not looking in the right places, what's the right place? You know, there will be people who are homeless, who could have been engineers, could have been steel erectors, could have been scaffolders, left the industry because of, I don't know, a family issue, a death, divorce, could be anything. We don't know the reasons behind why, but actually just need a bit of a helping hand to get back into it, or to start again, or to do something. So yeah, I think there's an opportunity there, and I think socially, you know, when you're looking morally what you should be doing, people say about giving back into the industry, and I think the old cliche of sponsoring your own kids' football club's probably not the social value that the people who put the names on the shirts think it is. It's okay, you know, for that club for that year, but when your kid goes from under 10s to under 11s and you don't sponsor them anymore, then, you know, that's not done a lot of good. But getting one person from being homeless is a result, isn't it? You know, that's something that will last that person's lifetime. So I think it's important that we look at that, you know, from both perspectives. Yes, we've got to take care of the people within construction and we've got to make sure we can support them, but actually could we be doing a bit more and looking at some of these people that are outside and seeing how we could get them in?
What do you think, how the Scaffolding Association and its members can help to achieve this goal, how we can participate into it as a one unit and doing some good for all?
I think it's, as I said at the start, I think this issue isn't is an industry issue. It isn't any particular company. It's every company. So it is every company that's got to do it. We've put things in Access Point that have gone out to the whole of the industry over mental health. We've put issues in there about education. We've put things in there. Alltask have got a program whereby they've got somebody who specialises in going out and recruiting people and looking at schools and doing things. So there are already members out there that are doing it, but we can't do it individually. Everybody's got to do it. Everybody has got to be playing their part and looking at it and thinking, how do I do that? But I think as an association, what we've tried to do is look at people that are doing it. I said to you, we've got somebody who's working with ex-offenders and looking at how we can transmit that information about how you go about doing that. So where would I start? So if you contact the Scaffolding Association about any of these things, then we can say to you, let's have a look at this. This is how you would go about that. This is a member who's already been doing that. Have a word with him. I think as an industry, we don't talk to each other enough, you know, company to company. We're all competitors, but as we said, there won't be an industry here if we don't keep recruiting people, because it's getting to a stage where people are turning down work because they haven't got enough guys. Okay, there may be a bit of a blip at the moment with where the construction output is, but by and large, I still probably think we haven't got enough guys. Even if it's slowing down, we haven't got enough. And as we've said, if we're looking sort of 5 to 10 years in the future, the war in Ukraine finishes, we lose some more people, other things go on, we've got an ageing workforce as it is, then you could have quite a bleak view on it. Not that I'm a person who looks that way. I tend to be an optimist, and I think everybody will do their bit and we will manage to progress and pull through it.
Well, I think we need to start doing it right now, sooner rather than later, because we haven't got 10 years time to catch up. I think we already lost some time in terms of skill gap and the training and awareness about the whole industry, how it operates. So we will do as much as we can. We as a business, as an embassy side services, we will put as much as effort into it to make the awareness, to get everyone involved, and then and we will very closely cooperate with a Scaffolding obviously association as a biggest scaffolding association in the UK, who have got loads of members who can share their experience together, and maybe we can build some kind of a webinar or between the contractors so we can share the experience, how we can improve it, how we can push that for change.
Yeah, we will be looking at business improvement at the we'll have a conference again at the later on in the year, and that's open to non-members and members, so it's not just for Scaffold Association members. Non-members can buy tickets, and again there'll be a section in there about how can you improve your business and what can you do, but also about the benefits of how you join all those things together, because I think now a scaffold business is very complex. I think years ago it was perhaps a little bit easier, but now there are so many things that you have to sort of consider that I think it's important that you get the opportunity to talk to other companies, or for other companies to say how they've managed to overcome some of the obstacles. So it is a community. That's how it should be. We shouldn't look at it as people being competitors. You're always going to be competitors when it comes to price, but actually as an industry, for the industry to thrive, people need to talk to each other and make sure we're sharing best practice and make sure that people understand what the right thing to do is.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.